everyone, Randy Lilson. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Conga, and today I am very pleased to be joined by Tiffani Bova. Tiffani is the Global Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce, and we are going to be talking about driving business growth. Tiffani, let's start with this. In your book, Growth IQ, you talk about a growth stall, which seems very pertinent today in today's economic environment. What is a growth stall, and what do you recommend for companies to get out of a growth stall?
Well, when I wrote this book a couple of years ago, it was looking at companies that might have 2 or 3 quarters where they're either seeing flat or declining growth. And that's usually an indication that they're kind of showing up at what I called a growth stall, right? It could have been happening over time, might have gone in and out, like one quarter was a little soft, and then there was a recovery, and then the next quarter was a little soft. And so it might be some lumpiness, which is the technical term. But if you think about it from a growth stall, it's when you just see consistently either flat or negative growth. Now, the trick with that is the indicators that was probably going to happen was probably 3 or 4 quarters ago. And it's just starting to manifest itself in this flat to negative growth. So if you maybe see a decline in leads or a longer conversion cycle for deal velocity, if you see a spike in churn, if you see that customers are not maybe opening up your newsletters, you're just starting to see indicators that something is changing. Do not wait too long for it to then, once again, show up as a stall where now you are 3 or 4 quarters into this decline and now you're trying to play catch up. And what happens when companies try to do that catch up is they either hire more salespeople, spend more marketing dollars, or cut costs, right? They're trying to rejigger the business so that ultimately it gets back to growth. But that kind of recovery from a stall almost takes as long as it took you to get into it, right? So getting out of it in quarter is really, really difficult.
So another concept that you talk about in the book is the 10 strategies to drive growth. Enlighten us. I'm sure everybody's going to be very interested in hearing about your 10 strategies to drive growth.
Well, how that came about was I used to be a practitioning leader for sales, marketing, and customer service some 15 or 16 years ago. And then I spent a decade as a research fellow at Gartner advising some of the largest technology companies in the world, but also startups and mid-sized businesses. And it was pretty consistent that when those brands, regardless of where they were in the world and again, what their revenue was, we're trying to achieve growth in very similar ways. I'm going to take my existing product and sell more of it to my existing base. I'm going to sell my existing product to new customers. I'm going to introduce new products to existing customers, new products to new customers. The Ansoff matrix has been around for 75 years. And so I did not come up with 10 new growth strategies or growth paths out of the blue. What I did was I took those that have been tried and true and tested over the last 100 years or so, and I modernized them using social, mobile, cloud, big data, AI, analytics, all the things we now have at our disposal, which makes those kinds of investments into growth much easier. Supply chain is different. You can do e-commerce globally and ship globally. You can hire skilled, customer service agents from other parts of the world. You can, partner for R&D and development of products. It's very different than it used to be. So trying to deconstruct growth across those 10 paths was really exciting because it started to fall into place where I saw companies doing multiple at the same time. The one thing about growth is it's never one thing. So no company is just on one growth path. They're always on multiple. So the combination of those growth paths is what is unique to each business. And then the sequence or the order in which companies do those actions and do those growth strategies, that in combination, that is what makes each go-to-market model or growth strategy unique for each company.
So we've been talking about growth, and obviously everybody wants growth, but another thing people want around revenue is certainty. What advice do you have for companies to try to increase revenue certainty?
It's a great question because, when the pandemic first hit, the question I got most often was, I'm looking to make sure I'm not losing revenue during this time as much as I can possibly control that. And I said, look, get back to basics. Do not ignore the customers you already have. You've already spent money if you're in, a recurring revenue business on the CAC, right? The customer acquisition cost. You don't want to be churning customers and bleeding that because every customer you lose, you have to replace. But many companies are so focused on net new that they forget about the gold they already have in that customer base. So trying to get some stability in revenue is first and foremost, take care of those you've already acquired. If you're in a recurring revenue business, it cannot be, I cannot stress that any more than I just said it, right? Because, it's kind of the rule of 76. For every one you add, you don't have to replace. And so get on the offense of making sure you're staying in front of customers leaving you with offering them new valuable services or products, improving customer service, optimizing the business, introducing new digital capabilities. But on the net new side, that is equally as important. But that's where you have to get much more narrow and smarter about where you go looking for those net new customers and almost how much you're willing to spend on acquiring them and how much time it's taking you to actually close those deals. If you can look at those as two separate sort of buckets of revenue opportunity, you want to stay as balanced as you can in those because I see many make the mistake of they get too focused on net new, they forget the existing, or they get too focused on existing and they forget net new. We have to make sure that we've got a strategy that looks at both of those. Whether you're in a recurring business or not, it's important to go after those customers you already have.
So one of the things you've talked about is internal inertia being one of the biggest obstacles to revenue growth. Can you elaborate on that and explain why is that and how do you overcome that?
That was the opening to my book, Growth IQ. It was a study done by Bain where they went out around the globe and they asked executives what did they think the reason was that it was getting harder for companies to grow. And it wasn't external factors. Now, let me be really clear. This is pre-pandemic. So it was not external factors. It was internal inertia. Like some 94 and 95% of companies above 5 billion. And then below that, which, the majority of companies are well below that, sort of 99% of them are. And so, that internal inertia is, it's not the way we do it here. We tried it, it failed. Maybe we don't have the culture or the talent to do it. And so that internal inertia gets in your way that when there are external market opportunities for you to capitalize on, like we're in the middle of one right now, and you could go back in time and say in the last recession or, we had our last challenging time for growth, those companies that came out the other side of it were those that doubled down, and were making investments through that cycle. And not all small and medium businesses have that kind of capital to make those investments. And that's why you have to get smarter on that internal inertia. Are we organized right? Are we focused on the right things? Are we distracted by things that we should no longer be focused on? And those are the kinds of hard conversations that need a beginner's mind. That is, are you open and willing to try new things? Or do you have a fixed mindset that regardless of what is happening externally, regardless of what I learn internally, we will keep doing what we're doing and doing it the way we always have because it's always worked for us. And so, success is a lousy teacher, as Bill Gates has said, right? So ultimately, we want to make sure that we are not only paying attention to what's happening externally, like all the things that are going on right now, but make sure you spend equal time, if not more, optimizing your existing business. There is usually a lot of fat on the bone that you can cut away. And I don't mean riffing people and I don't mean pulling back on budgets. I mean leveraging technology better, automating redundant tasks, looking for productivity improvements. That's all things you can do internally that have very little to do with external. And so those are the kinds of things that build that resilient business, but that internal inertia will kill a great strategy every single day.
So for years, we've talked about sales operations, and now it seems to be very fashionable to talk about revenue operations. You actually believe companies should be thinking about growth operations. What's growth operations and how is it different from sales and revenue operations?
Yeah, this is one I always get. If I speak at a sales ops or a sales enablement conference, they always kind of go, oh, when I say that, right? But I'm not trying to respin and call it something different without actually changing it foundationally. So I believe that there's value in sales ops, obviously, very focused on the motion of selling, right? Then you've got revenue operations, making sure, are we taking in revenue easily, right? Is it easy to take the cash and to pay our bills and to do all the things we do around revenue? But that's also very focused on top line. And so growth operations for me is like what we were just talking about on churn, right? Don't lose business. That's a way to grow. And that's not a sales function, right? It could be a customer success or customer service function. Revenue operations, is not maybe looking at, well, how are we growing? Is what we're doing working? Is it going to work 12 to 24 months from now? Have we exhausted that sort of, kind of revenue stream, if you will? So growth ops for me is much more horizontal. Sales ops is kind of, the down of the T. And revenue ops is also down of the T, where growth can be saving more customers, reducing churn, increasing price in a recurring revenue business. Like that is growth as well. Eliminating some portions of the business or products that are no longer profitable. That is growth as well. And so that allows you to think much more broadly about top line growth. And also bottom line and impact. But I don't want you to hear that I'm just respinning the name and not changing something fundamentally. The best example I can give is customer service. I remember when customer service kind of started to rename itself customer success. But if you don't change the process, the remit, the training, the skills, the enablement, the metrics, all the things in customer service, and you just change the name to customer success, it's not going to work. Like you really have to do the work that is required in order to start to think more broadly in the silo of where sales ops sits or revenue ops sits, and really look at it across all the things that generate revenue and also reduce costs.
So you've shared in your book that 54% of organizations have not aligned their sales processes and therefore they're not optimized. Why is that so critical for organizations to get right?
I'm going to say a couple things I know for sure that I know are true. Companies do two things. They make stuff and they sell stuff. It's about that basic. Now, sometimes you may say, I don't make my own product, but I think you get the point, right? You make stuff or you acquire it and then you sell it. But ultimately, you have to sell it to get top line revenue, right? Hire people, like keep your lights on and your doors open. You need that revenue. But a lot of effort around sales ops and sales process is very internally focused, meaning we need 8 steps in the sales process because that's the way I can justify the marketing spend, or I can justify the head count, or I can create account coverage models, or it gives me more sphere of influence. Whatever the reason, those 8 steps is very internal. So the second thing I often say I know for sure that is true is salespeople do not wake up every day and they can't wait to data enter. That I know for sure. And the second thing I know for sure is a customer does not wake up every day and go, oh, today is such a fantastic day. I'm going to go from stage 2 to stage 3 in the sales process. Or I'm going through this magical funnel down ADA. Like they're not paying attention. That is all about us. So why I don't like that kind of splitting of the hair so fine is because it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the customer. So I want to optimize the processes that are in the sort of connection and communication and sharing of information, which you then can, convince a customer to do business with you. I want to make that as seamless and frictionless as possible. Now, those are buzzwords, and what does that actually mean? Well, I'd say start by asking your customers. What do they think about the buying process? How far down that journey were they before they reached out? Is that consistent? Is there a way you could collapse that timeline? You won't know any of that unless you do some investigation. That's where sales ops can actually play a really great role to deconstruct the selling process and see where are there places in which you can optimize to improve. The second side of that is I'd say talk to your salespeople. They know what processes are broken. They know where they have to work harder and not smarter. They know where the technology is not integrated. They know when they're doing things just for management to look at their productivity metric versus it has no bearing on their ability to sell. 66% of a salesperson's time is spent on non-selling activities, and 52% of sellers will misquote day 1 of the quarter. That number has remained fairly constant over the decade and all the improvements we've seen in CRM. So what is broken? It isn't a technology problem. It's a people process problem. And it's not just because I work at Salesforce. Look, it's not about Salesforce technology. It's about making sure that the people and process side is aligned appropriately with the technology. So you're making it easier for your sellers to do their job and easier for your customers to consume and buy from you.
Tiffani, thanks for the great insights. Thank you for joining us. We invite you to learn more at conga.com.